Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. This is going to be 420. Now, I have right many new subscribers, and so for those of you who don't know, let me check my sound first. A 420 is a blaze one if you got one episode. It is a take your bong hit, smoke your bowl, take a hit of your vape. If you're being healthy, good job. But it's put skepticism to the side. You can be skeptical afterwards. And just be. Just float in thought. Just be. Float in whatever we're talking about at that moment. It could be out-of-body experiences. It could be aliens. It could be some of anything. But whatever it is. For that span of time, that 10, 15 minutes, whatever. Just be. Just chill. Take your bowl, take your blunt, take your bong, whatever. Just be. I tried to get this, like I said, at 420. These episodes started because it was 420, I think, last year. And I think I did an episode on saying, hey, let's just do a 420 episode. And people get kind of spacey when they're stoned. They start thinking of all these interesting things that they hadn't necessarily thought of before. So I call it 420 series. Let's have these wild, expansive thoughts, and let's exist in those thoughts, and let's just talk about those things. This, I think, fits in that category, even though it doesn't technically fit in the category. It's a weird one. In fact, let me put this part in while I'm doing this. This one, I like this one, and I think this one is somewhat important, and I realize, and important from the standpoint of, unless you can have an idea of what you want, it's difficult to kind of get to what you want. Like, if I ask you, what do you want to eat? And you're saying, I don't know. I can never really give to you what you want to eat. If you can't tell me what you want to eat. You kind of have, to some degree, have this view in your head. My wife and I decided that we wanted to travel. I love traveling. When her and I met, well, before her and I met, I did solo travel around the world. Loved it. And when she hitched her start in my wagon, that was one of the things that she loved about me, that I loved to do that. And she got her passport, and she also started to travel. We wanted to just travel. And our thought was, well, how do you just do that? You have all of these things. Like you say, okay, I want to travel. That's great. In order to travel, I need to get a house. I need to get a car. I need to get a job. I need to get all these things. And by the time you have all those things, you now have this kind of bell that's holding you down, so you can't do the thing that you actually wanted to do. So the thought was, look, once the lease is up, give up the lease, and let's just go. The money that we were paying for rent and everything else, let's just pay as we go along. And then the thought became, okay, how do you do that? Well, your job would have to be remote. Okay. What else? And you start kind of making this plan of how do you do these things? And you're checking one thing off of your list as you get to those things, where you eventually get to the point of, if this plan was right, and if all of these things were able to work out, now I'm at the point of X. And that's with pretty much anything. There's some things that you fall ass backwards into, but things that require a certain amount of thought and a certain amount of organization, it's a procedural way to get to it. In this 420, I want to think about the future, and I want to think about it in euphoric terms. Oftentimes, I do news shows, and I do analysis. And sometimes, often, I'm cynical in my analysis, but I'm cynical for good reason. This is the time to which I live in. This is the plot of history to which I've, been fixed. So I'm a product of my society, just like everyone else is a product of their society. And so that's the way I come out. That's the way it processes. But it doesn't have to be that way. Your world doesn't necessarily have to be that way. There's nothing forcing your world to be this way. Part of my angst and part of my annoyance with all of this is because I recognize that. The angst between how we are versus what we can be is why I do this show. What I'm asking is, think of what the world looks like when human beings get past just crawling about their basic needs. What does the world look like? Think about that for the moment. Honestly, think about that. Think about that from a standpoint of what is human life like? What does it consist of? How do people spend their time? What does the earth look like? What does the ecosystem look like? What do the value system looks like? What needs to be in place for that to take place? And how do you make changes? How do you move? How do you tweak? How do you twist to get to that particular point? What I realized when I was talking about this, or when I was thinking about this, I realized what I was talking about was freedom. And honestly, what I mean is, we spend so much time just in our day-to-day lives, just trying to make our bare needs met. 60%, I've said this before, 60% of the country, if they got hit with a $500 car note, couldn't afford to pay it. This is the richest country on the planet. And you have that level of poverty in the country. That's a problem. Now, here's the thing, and this is flat fact true. You have the technical know-how to use the resources of your world to see to the needs of everybody on this planet. If your value systems changed, meaning you weren't having this thing of rapacious wealth, meaning everyone needed to get as much as they needed to get, I'm fighting for my little corner, fuck away from me, and this is what, you know. If that wasn't your value system, you would have a fundamentally different world. All of this, the problem here is not the world. The problem here is not the resources. The problem here is none of those things. It's us. War is us. Resources is us. Poverty is us. Crime is us. All of these things are us. They don't have to be this way. We've organized ourselves in a weird and strange and peculiar way. And because of this organization, because of the things we tell ourselves that it's okay for somebody to have $100 billion and somebody else just be sleeping in the street. This is an economic system to which we created, and yet we act as if this thing is a monster unto itself, this Frankenstein that just kind of doles the stuff up, as if it's not policy, as if it's not laws that make these things true. What does the world look like for the moment when a person is not forced to do a job, where a person does a job because he wants to do a job, when a person goes to school because they want to go to school, where a person does things not because they're compelled to do so, because their needs, these vulgar needs, compulsions, force them to do these things? What you will come to the conclusion is, what you have for all intents and purposes is freedom. Ultimately, the person has choice. Now, I know when I say this, and I'm talking about freedom, you get into this thing of what does that even mean? When Mel Gibson is stretched across the thing and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, freedom! This kind of blood-curdling scream. Is he saying the same thing as Paul Ryan, when Paul Ryan is talking about freedom? Of course he's not. This word is so expansive, it's so explosive and euphoric. But what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean? Do you really want to be free to die of cancer without any kind of medical care? That is a freedom of sorts. It's not necessarily the freedom that most people think of. The right wing, when they scream about freedom, ultimately what they're talking about is freedom of the 1% to do whatever they want. It's like freedom for who to do what. It's freedom for a small minority to have all sorts of sway over the collective. They're talking about freedom for the people who are paying them. It's like anybody else. People write for their audience. They're talking to their audience. They're talking to the audience of plutocrats. That freedom is specific to them. They want to have money and resources and use the money and the resources any way they want to. Now, that freedom is a limiting factor for everyone else, meaning it's almost like an unfreedom. The expansiveness of their freedom is somewhat of a limiting factor on your own freedom. Let's be honest. Let's be very honest. Whether you're on the right or the left, let's be honest. There's no such thing as individuality in our world. Anything that you do to some degree is going to affect me, meaning your freedom ends at the tip of my nose. But the fact is, if you're doing something to the air, if you're doing something to the water, if you're doing something to the ground, whether you're doing it on purpose or not, whether your effect is innocuous or not, it's affecting me. You can't get away from it. There's no patch of land that you can go to at this point. Nothing that you can do that is not going to affect me, either for better or for worse. When you're going to get oil because you want to get energy, and I understand we all need energy, we all love energy, but when you're going to get that and you're putting stuff into the sky and I'm inhaling that stuff, you're adversely affecting me. You're making billions, but you're adversely affecting me. When the scientists are telling me that the environment is falling apart, you're adversely affecting me. This concept of freedom is not this purely individualistic thing when you can't have a society that's purely individualistic. This is kind of what I'm getting at. There has to be this rational understanding of any particular term, especially with this particular sense of freedom. Freedom is not necessarily for the individual to do as they will. It is for you to be this kind of expansive person. You have the ability for food, clothing, shelter, and sense of purpose. But that still has to have this collective understanding, this rational understanding, that what you do will adversely, or for the better or for worse, affect other people. And any notion of freedom, if you're talking about putting that into some kind of law or espousing that in some kind of law, has to take that into account. What the right espouses as freedom is lunacy. I want the freedom to pollute. Yeah, but that freedom to pollute is fucking up life for me and my kids and whoever else is living in that environment. How's that freedom? How's that freedom? What I'm talking about when I'm saying freedom is not somebody using their powers and their abilities and all of these things that they can do with their human physique because they're stuck, because they need things in order to get food, clothing, and shelter. The moment that people are free of those things, meaning society has organized itself in a way where, yes, people still do labor, yes, people still work, but it's not the same thing where this person has to work at McDonald's because this person is not going to be able to feed their kid or even feed themselves. I'm talking about something fundamentally different. Whether this is still a capitalistic system or not at this point, I don't care. I'm talking about a society, a world, where people don't necessarily have to be stuck in these impoverished situations in countries that have the capacity to provide for all of these things. And beyond that, what does the world look like when you're not stuck with a particular bill, where you're not stuck having this capacity of saying, oh God, if I go and get this operation, I'm going to have this $50,000 debt over my head. What does the world look like? What does a human being look like? What does a human being feel like when he's not enraptured in all of these bills and things that are around him? These legal fictions that bite at him. What does that human being look like? What does a human being feel like? And can't you make an honest argument that says, with these structures in place to ensure that this person has the basic things that he needs, he's not going to go hungry. If he's sick, he's going to get health care. If he wants to get an education, he's going to go to school. Even if you keep the other stuff pat from a capitalistic standpoint, those things being part of the system itself. What is life like for that person? And what are the things that that person thinks about now that those things are off his chest? My point that I get at is that we're a ball hurling through the cosmos. And I've said this before. I know I've said this many a times. And I say that because that's real reality. Getting hit by an asteroid is a real reality. When Russia had that thing burst through the sky and exploded those people's windows, and people were like, oh my God, did you see that asteroid do that? The asteroid is real reality. Now, we get so stuck in this thing of, okay, I need to get this bill paid. I need to get this particular person to this particular point. I need to drive to this place and do this. This girl is bugging me. I love this particular guy. That guy is hot. I need to go to Valentine's Day. I need to go to this particular job. This person is going to this job interview. This guy looked at me funny. That guy stepped on my foot. This is not the French fries that I ordered. Lunacy. There's a real reality. This is ridiculousness and dramas. I want to get to the real reality stuff. And it's like you can't actually get to the real reality stuff while you have this stuff mingling about. what does it look like when there's no poverty? That's what I'm asking. Do you understand that getting rid of poverty, even if that was the only thing that you did from a public health standpoint, you're talking about getting rid of a large amount of crime. You're talking about getting all of these people out of prison cells. You're talking about allowing all of this untamed access to education, meaning the moment that you expose and allow people to get education, what does your schools look like? How many doctorates? How many master's degrees? How many new bachelor degrees? We limit ourselves. I think it's a flat fact to say that if school was open for anybody to go to school, you would have all sorts of people going to school. I think that's somewhat of a flat fact. That's clear. If the same thing was done for masters and doctorates, what does it mean for your society when you take the chains off of innovation, when you take the chains off of research and study, and these people who for the most part would have been vanguards, people who would have been homeless in your system, people would have been going to shitty schools in your system, now all of a sudden have access to high quality education. And not just that, are not in a situation where they will ever starve, and not in a situation where they would not necessarily have somewhere to stay. What is life like in that world compared to what is life like in this world? And understand that the difference between those two worlds is just policy. From a science standpoint, just with our basic level of understanding now, we could eviscerate poverty across the globe. From our current scientific understanding of things, society can be redesigned where technology does most of the labor. I'm trying to make this point that all of these things are purely within our grasp, and all of these things are purely a quirk of choice. The reason why I say put yourself in that mind space is because from the standpoint of the left, I want people to get in their heads, this is actually possible. This is just a quirk of policy. This is a quirk of governance. That's all this is. I would make the argument to you that that's actual freedom. Freedom is not necessarily purely this individualistic thing. Freedom is working within a collective to some degree. But within a collective with this mindset of allowing the individual to be whatever the individual wants. Now mind you, there is going to be a limit to the individual because the individual for the most part is always going to run up against the collective. But in this case, what I'm saying is freedom is food, clothing, shelter, and a sense of purpose, meaning you're not working a job where somebody is your superior just because they have this more money or more finances over you. I'm saying if you're working a job, you're doing so because you want to work that job. There is a massive difference in those things. There's a massive difference in the way that we go about our affairs. I understand, if you're working in a system that you hate and you're doing alienated labor, that's not freedom. That is the opposite. If you're working 50, 60 hours a week in the job that you hate for minimum wage, that's not freedom, that's the opposite. And the fact is, 60% of the population is working in those situations, meaning the majority of the people in this country is working a low-wage job. The majority of the other people in this country is either in poverty or low wage. You have areas of this country, richest country on the planet. What's his name? Amazon, Bezos, over $100 billion. And yet you have places in this country that look like a third world country, third world nation. I'm saying those things are acts of policy. Those things are the way in which we're arranged. And those things are wholly unnecessary. Freedom in this case is making sure that you're not subordinate in cases where you don't want to be subordinate, whether that's your job or whether that's anything else. You're a human being. You have value. Your society looks at that value and it recognizes that value. So no, you're not going to be in a situation where you have alienated labor, where you're working somewhere where you hate. If a machine can do the job, let the machine do the job. Meaning, if there's a hamburger that can be flipped by a machine, I want the hamburger flipped by a machine. If there's a robot that can drive you from point A to point B, I want that robot doing that. I don't want the human being doing that. The problem is the society screams, oh my God, you're getting rid of jobs. Yes, we're getting rid of jobs that computers can do better. That's a positive. It's getting across this thing to you that there's a problem in the way that you've organized yourselves. And fact is, technology is not the problem, technology is the solution. This is a quirk of our understanding in the way through which we arrange ourselves. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. There's nothing forcing us to be this way. Look, I guess my only point is, if you're subordinate for the majority of your week, That's not freedom. That's what I'm trying to get across. I understand that people have in this ingrained idea of freedom, justice, I work this job, and all this other stuff. It's one thing if you're doing something that you want to do. It's one thing if you take on a task and you're working with a company, working on something else that you want. But most people don't do that. Most people are alienated in the labor that they do. I'm trying to get this across that that's not freedom. That's not freedom. Yes, we need a redefinition of freedom. And even if you just want to go from the standpoint of making sure that people have the base of their needs met, that they're not ever stuck in a situation where they're doing something because they have to do it because they're going to starve. Eliminating that alone would give a certain measure of freedom that has never been felt in this world by the large majority of the population. What I'm saying here is right. Imagine for the moment that you were born into a society where there is no situation, providing some societal collapse, that you would ever go hungry, that you would ever not have somewhere to stay, that you would ever not be able to get an education, where you won't even know what it means to have $50,000 of debt on your back. What does that mean for you? What does it mean for your psyche? What does it mean for that particular person growing up in a society where those things are provided in the same way that public education is provided, in the same way that roads are provided, in the same way that electricity is provided? That's a different world. And that's a world where you have people who are not subordinate. You have people who, for the most part, are free. Yes, that's a different definition of freedom, because that's not this individualistic thing where I'm doing it on my own and I'm eating snails and living in the forest. It's this recognition that, yes, I am an individual, but I am an individual that's part of a collective, a society. And anything that I do is going to affect somebody some way. We may as well acknowledge it and deal with it. So yes, I am going to have freedom. But all of us accepts that we're vulnerable. And in accepting that we're vulnerable, we work together to make sure that vulnerability is lessened. To the degree to which we, as a society, can provide, you will not go hungry. You will not go without. You will never be forced to take a job that you're doing purely because you hate. If you want to stop porn, there you go. Right off the bat, they're not forced to do something they hate. If you don't necessarily want to flip hamburgers, there you go. You don't have to do that. You're not forced to do it. At the very least, your basic bare bone needs are met until you figure out what you actually want to do. What I would tell you is you would have a damn happier world. You have a damn happier world. Let's see. Who's here? I'm surprised you guys are here this early. I thought nobody would be here. Insomnia brought me here. Jeremy Jones, Insomnia brought me here too. Agreed. Joshua Renzo, I spam this channel too much with political talk. Let's talk about something else that has been bothering me for quite some time. Golden Silence. Why does Jamal never wear a Kango hat? It would be the tail end of the generation, and I think it would look dope as fucking one. I've never worn a Kango, even when Kangos were in style. I used to wear skull caps. I used to wear... Oh, wait a minute. Did I wear a Kango? I used to wear Kango backwards. I used to wear it backwards. Jamal sleeps in front of his camera and immediately streams when he wakes up. No, Jeremy, actually, I was in bed, wide awake, playing Fallout while my wife was asleep. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Why am I sitting here? I feel like if I'm going to be doing anything, I might as well just do videos. So, rich kids live like that. The rest of us will die. Dax Jacobson. Yeah, rich kids do live like that. Now, they always make the point of, well, if you do that, what would be the incentive? It's like, what is the incentive for rich people to get up in the morning? Why don't they shoot themselves, if that's your logic? Look, we're not deprived by having those things. You're emboldened. If your society cares about the people of the society itself, meaning if you actually give two shits about the people, the kids who are in your society, when your government is making choices and making decisions, part of those decisions and choices should go into this idea of how do we make our society better? What are the values of our particular society? How do we embolden that? How do we, how do we help? If you're not helping making the lives of the human beings in your society better, then you're failing at what you're doing. And this is kind of the problem with Congress. They fail miserably at what they're doing. The question becomes, what is their task and what are they trying to do? Now, clearly, if what they're trying to do is make the lives of people materially better, they failed at their task. I would argue that that's not their job. Their job is something different. Their job should be that. That should be the goal. But there's no way where you can look at Congress, what Congress has been doing, and say that this is what they've been trying to do in society. They work for their donors. They work for the people who pay them and bribe them. That's both parties. That's both. Look, I understand libertarians have this idea of this weird system of, what do they call it? A narco-capitalistic thing where everybody's out for themselves. That's not freedom, man. I'm sorry, that's not freedom. Unless you have your basic needs met, food, clothing, shelter, a sense of fulfillment in regards to what you're doing, you would never have freedom. It can't exist without it. And here's another newsflash. Just because you may reach that particular point, there's still other people on the planet that are going to have a say, meaning those people will come after you. There's no such thing as freedom without a recognition of the other people that are around you. That's kind of the point. That's what I'm getting at. And freedom in this case is collective. Yes, you're working within a system. And yes, there are things where you push against the collective on. But fact is, I'm talking about a very basic thing. Leave me to my devices with the exception of the basic needs. Meaning set up structures that make sure those things are provided. Set up structures. It doesn't have to be this bureaucratic thing. Set up structures that they themselves, almost like little mini corporations that have the job of doing that. Making sure that the basic needs that these people need are met. Whether that's creating these extrusion homes, like this kind of Venus project thing where you have automated systems that automatically create the homes. Look, fact is, we need a value system change. Now, I don't know how you get the value system change without having the system itself change in order to kind of tweak the system itself, meaning people slowly change. And before people say, no, that doesn't work, it has worked. Look at what took place with regards to American politics in the 40s versus now. The system itself changed. The society itself contoured itself around the change. Now, meaning even if you want to talk about civil rights, the government itself took a position, and the government itself made certain changes in society, whereas at a certain point society kind of went along with the flow that the government was pushing. That kind of makes the point, at the very least in somewhat of an implicit way. Your society itself affects the behavior of the individuals in the society. Culture. I mean, come on. What is this? Joshua Renshaw, you talked about your love for civilization the other day. Have you ever given their billions a try? It's basically civilization with zombie hordes. I have not. I've never even heard of that one. Joshua Renshaw, thank you, man. I've never even heard that one. All right, so I have a few of these videos that I want to do. This was just a small one. Nobody's going to watch this. But I do 420s every so often. I don't necessarily want to give those up. Look, honestly, the world doesn't have to be this way. I say it all the time because I want to get into people's heads that it can change. One of the key components, though, is knowing what you're trying to change it into. What are you trying to change it into? Now, for me, I am not hard ideologically in any particular thing. I always look at it as your idea of the world needs to be rational and sustainable. Otherwise, you're talking about a planet that's going to end itself. If it's sustainable from the standpoint of humanity, where humanity is not suffering and humanity is prospering and growing, etc., and the planet is sustainably kept, I shut up. That is not the situation to which we found ourselves. It has been the exact opposite. So I keep my mouth running. So, all right, guys, I'm going to end this one here because I have several that I want to do for today, and the other ones are going to be a little bit more somber. So let's start on a happy, fun note with 420. All right, guys. Thanks, guys. And by the way, Joshua Renshaw, thank you very much, man. It's always appreciated. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.